no more true, again, than when I first joined the commission and I wanted to lower property taxes. And you and the mayor made it very clear that you were opposed to that. And that discussion didn't go very far because you all convinced me that it's not legal to lower property taxes. And I was new to the commission. I took a lot of people's word for a lot of things. I've learned a lot since then. I've learned that I shouldn't have trusted you in the first place. And since I've learned that it is indeed possible to raise or to lower property taxes. I mean, we can even get into, you know, at some point, I appreciate the fact that this might have to go into closed session. My point is that there's a difference between saying something that's half true that gives somebody that I think intentionally gives somebody the wrong impression. Like we have a $350,000 deficit. Now we all know that doesn't mean we have a $350,000 loss. But I think we also all know that when people hear we have a $350,000 deficit, they get the impression that there's a $350,000 loss involved. And that's just common sense. So that's an example of something that's technically true and entirely misleading. That's one thing. That's one thing. When we were discussing this budget and I wanted to cut money out, I wanted to cut the city manager's budget by $2,000, or down to $2,000 for contractual services. I was told, and Steve told us this, he stood right there at that podium and told us that we couldn't take that money out because we wouldn't have anybody on staff who could fill Ramona's place if Ramona got sick. That we needed to keep that money in there so we could bring somebody in to do that work for us. In reality, an assistant city manager had already been added to the budget without our consent, without our knowledge. Nobody told us that this position was in the budget. And we were getting ready to vote on the budget. But here's my point. It's one thing to omit a detail that large from the commission. I mean, I would argue that that's inherently a little dishonest. But it's not just that you didn't tell us that we would have Alex on staff next year. And I'm glad we do, Alex. I'm not picking on you. I think you're doing a fine job. My beef isn't that you didn't tell us that. I mean, I do have a problem with the fact that you didn't tell us that we were adding Alex, that she was in the budget. My problem is that you stood there, looked us in the eye, and told us to our faces that she would not be here. That we wouldn't have that person sitting right there doing that job, which you knew at the time was not true. I guess you don't remember telling me because you never acknowledged convincing me that it's illegal to lower property taxes too. You probably don't know what I'm talking about there.
Let me respond to you.
There's a lot of issues here. I don't even know where to start, to be honest with you. But I'm going to continue on, if I can, with this chart for a second and just go and finish up the numbers. Let me say one thing. When you go to the bank and you borrow money, and you go to the bank and you say, they ask you, what's your income? Are you going to tell them how much you're transferring out? If you're transferring, say you're at a low point, you're transferring $1,000 out of savings every month. Are you going to tell them that my income's, for example, if your pure income is $22,000, you're bringing in $22,000. Are you going to tell them that your income is $23,000 because you're transferring, you know, $1,000 out of your savings account? A transfer is not income.
I understand that.
That's my point.
I understand that. But if I loan my dad's plumbing business $1,000 a year, he asked a question and I'm answering his question. He asked the question.
Continue.
Yeah.
I guess that was a rhetorical question.
Is, you know, it doesn't balance out. And if you have to keep transferring, at some point in time, you may not be able to transfer because you may drain that source dry. And we got a perfect example right now. We're taking $300,000 out of E911, okay? Last quarter, I couldn't make the transfer. I transferred $75,000 a quarter. I couldn't make the transfer because there wasn't enough money to transfer. I would have taken it. I had $55,000 in cash. I was going to make the $75,000. I couldn't make it. So my point is, now I know sewer's not the same situation, but when I take money from your account, when I take $300,000 from your account, that's just $300,000 less that you can do on sewer projects, right? I mean, anytime I take money from another account, like, and I'll give you another example, like municipal aid. We all voted last month to take $320,000 out of municipal aid to buy 3 garbage dump trucks. And the garbage truck was purchased out of transportation improvement account for $250,000, approximately. Maybe it's $230,000. Well, that money that came out of transportation improvement account, that's not even going to replenish itself. Okay, that's a non-replenishing account. So that money, that $250,000 is gone, which we'd have normally paid out of here if we'd have had the money to pay it out of here. The 3 garbage trucks have been, dump trucks have been postponing. So we postponed as long as we could. We had to buy them, so we paid them out of municipal aid. Well, that's just less money for sidewalks and for a paving. So a transfer, it's okay if you want to call it a receipt, but it's a transfer. It's not money coming in. It's not reoccurring money. It's money we're taking from another source to make sure that we balance out the account. It's not, it's
Are you saying that the money we take from are you saying that the transfer we make from the sewer department is just used to?
I'm saying we took it over to the general fund to make the to support the general fund, but that's just less money that Bill's got to spend on projects. We're taking his money.
Right, and my point is that that's illegal. We all know that isn't true, Steve. We're not taking the money from the sewer department to support the general fund. If so, then somebody should probably get charged with a crime. That's not legal.
Well, I think
that's not legal.
I think what we've cleared up so far is that the money's not just being taken from the sewer department to cover a hole in the general fund budget. It's being taken from the sewer fund for the city hall to provide essential services in the operations of the sewer department, of which, if the city hall did not provide those services, certainly Bill Scalf and his department would have to do it out of the existing sewer fee that he has in his budget. So, to me, it's not the same as taking money out of a savings account, because that would be like taking money out of the reserve. It's more like taking money from a second job. We're doing a service for Bill. Bill is paying us money for that service. To me, that is income that I count.
And I understand your point, but all I'm saying is, before 2006, we didn't take anything out of the sewer account.
I mean, but I can't do anything about
I know that. I know it's not your. I know it's not your fault, but I'm just saying we did not. That's one of the things that we started doing in 2007 to kind of shore things up. That's all I'm saying. Okay, that's one thing. Let's talk about, if we could, about where the money came from that I mentioned to the State Journal regarding the sanitation costs, because State Journal asked me how much we're spending on sanitation costs in 2010 and how much we're spending on 2012. Pull the numbers down, and I've got every number on there. Recycling's up. If you that difference column, the 1, 2, 3, 4th column over, recycling's up $85,000. Okay. If you look at garbage collection fee, it's down $283,000. So the net difference is about $200,000 in receipts that were taken in less under the new program that we did when he had the flat fee installed for a full year. I went just a little bit further. I went to 2012 and 13 and looked at the same numbers and prorated it for a full year, and it looks like it's real close. The number looks like it's still coming in pretty close, the same, because we got one more billing and I doubled my billings. It looks like we're going to be about the same level for a full year. I don't understand perfectly why the recycling's not up more than that, but that's where it's showing right now. And I even bumped it a little bit because I thought last month looked low, so I bumped it. So that's where the receipts are. We're down
I've got a question
about
about
$200,000 in receipts.
Where do the bags just factor into the garbage collection fee?
The bags are inside. This is the way it was coded. The bags are inside line item 6, contract.
No, the bags we're selling.
Oh, the bags you're selling? We're going to get, I talked to Tom today, we're going to get about, you said about $8,000 on the bags, and we haven't gotten that money yet, right? Or have we got it?
Yeah, we've got it.
So, yeah, it's in garbage collection fees on that line, yeah.
That's what I was asking.
Okay, so let's look down now at the expenses. And every line item is up, personnel cost is up, our benefit cost is up, contract service is up, And let me say, that's where the bags are. So we had a reduction, and I can tell you about this on the next page. We had a reduction of about $20,000 for a 6-month period. It's on the next line item, or next page, yeah, landfills and tipping fees. We're down for the 6-month period about $20,000, but we bought $37,000 of garbage bags. And, you know, a lot of those bags, we're giving those bags away. So, you know, that basically offset the cost of the bags offset the savings on the landfill cost. Now, I don't know, you know, when you get into a full year, you know, hopefully the bag purchases will be down and we can save some money there. Supply cost, it's up $51,000, and that includes the motor fuel cost. And let me say a little bit about motor fuel because Commissioner Wilder brought that up. And I understand what he's saying. We did have a huge increase in our gas cost, and we all know that because we're filling it in our pockets every time we go to fill up our cars. But if you look at that last page, what I did is I broke down the sanitation increase, and that cost in 2010 went up about 65%, about $53,000, and that's most of that $51,000 you see over there in supply cost. But what I did is I took the city cost excluding sanitation to see how much cost increase that they were feeling, because I knew that they didn't have a program change like that. So I wanted to see what kind of increase they had, and that was 37%. So you see that, you know, there's a 64% increase for sanitation, but there's only a 37% increase for the city as a whole when you back out sanitation. So just looking at these percentages, it looks like about $30,000, that $50,000 was due to energy cost up, and it looks like the other $22,000 or $23,000 was generated by, you know, the program change. And I know the future is to try to get someone to come and pick up the recycle so we don't have to take it to Lexington. But that's the problem right now. You know, we're spending more time en route to pick up the garbage, and then we got the big cost is probably the transportation to, you know, to Lexington. So, and then what I did is I looked down. I took it even further. I went down to 2000. I compared 2012 to 2013. Sanitation, of course we know that we haven't seen as big a cost increase on the fuel, but sanitation's cost went up 14%, and the city, excluding sanitation, went up 7%. So it's like, you know, double up. But anyway, that's the breakdown, you know, that I mentioned earlier, that two pages before that is the breakdown where the $800,000 came from.
I think my thing with the garbage program has always been that and I think I argued this when we voted on it, that I don't know that it's an immediate relief on the budget, but it's a long-term issue. And one of the things that I keep pointing to when I talk to people out in the public is, you know, one of the very first briefings with Jeff Hackbart at the Public Works Department, and I'm sure Tom can probably attest to this too, that we primarily use a lot of inmate labor for those garbage trucks. And as we've seen through the paper and in the media out there, that the reliability of that stream of inmate labor is not that reliable in terms of having less and less people available every day. It's possible in, you know, the next 4 or 5 years that could dry up completely. If that was to dry up completely, the millions of dollars that we would have to spend to hire people to continue to provide a municipal trash service would wipe out any of this. I mean, it would be a major expenditure. So one of the key components of the pay-as-you-throw system, and why it is a long-term cost saver, is that it accelerates that movement to an automated pickup. And it gives us the infrastructure to be able to audit. If we lose that inmate labor in 3 or 4 years, we'll have the ability to immediately switch off of it and go to completely automated pickup without much loss of service and continuing to provide what we're here to do. And so that's one of the cost-saving measures. And And of course, as hopefully, I don't know how gas prices are going to end up, but certainly as we also know that one of the quickest rising costs is landfill tipping fees. And not only in Kentucky, but across the country, those rise pretty quickly. So will it be 5-10 years before we realize the savings from that? So when it comes to the garbage, I'm not as big of an issue in terms of, what are we seeing now? What are we seeing in 5 years? What have we avoided in the future that could have been a backbreaker for City Hall? But my issue is that I think we have some big words being used in the public sphere that can create a lot of fear among the public and make them have a little less trust and a little less faith that their government is working, it is continuing to do the services, and we're trying the best we can to make sure that it's doing so at a high level.
Mr. Dawson, have you made your presentation?
Yeah, I made my presentation. I want to just finish with a comment. I suppose what really concerns me is the way you frame things tonight and the way you frame things in a paper as far on your side.
Sure.
About me trying to manipulate numbers and mislead. First off, I'm a professional, and I take my job very seriously. I can't, as far as the bookkeeping side, I can't even manipulate the numbers if I want to. The deposits come in, my folks collect those deposits, and they make the deposits. The checks go out, my folks write the checks. I do sign off on the checks to make sure that it agrees to the invoice. And then they record the stuff in the system. I can't even influence that because I don't even have a code, an access code to go into the general ledger right now. Now I go in there at the end of the year and print some stuff off for the audit report, but you can go in and somebody can go in and audit that and see that I don't even go into the system. I'm basically checking controls. And I support my people. For example, if we get really busy when we're trying to collect both garbage fees and property tax, I'll go out there and say, can I take some of your mail so I can open it up and help you get things open? But I keep my door wide open when I do that. I take it straight back to them so they can put the money in the bank. I don't make any deposits or anything. So I can't influence the numbers that the auditor uses to do the audit report. And secondly, we've got, since I've been here 7 years, I've just finished my 7th year. We've gotten a clean opinion every year, no negative opinion. And we've had 3 different auditors. Plus, I've had the state auditor's office in here looking at stuff. And I've also had Department of Labor in here looking at things too. Now, they didn't look at the whole thing, but they looked at segments of our books. So I've gotten a clean opinion from everybody that's come. Now, we've got some things we need to improve. I admit that. And those are the management comments that come back from the auditors. So we've got some things we need to improve on. I admit that. So that's, secondly, as far as manipulating numbers, I understand where you're coming from. You're coming from the projection side and the budget side. But the budget, as I said before, where the budget numbers come from, it comes from, all the departments, all their overheads. The head count comes from what already has been agreed on. I put those numbers into the system and the outcomes for the budget. And as soon as I get it, you guys get it. I get the information. I was able to recap it by the end of February. As soon as I get it, I make sure, that was a area of contention, so I'm making sure you get the stuff. As soon as I get it, you get it. And so then we start working, trying to beat the stuff down. And what I'm saying is we were getting out of kilter. And that's why what we encountered in 2012 and 13 didn't just happen in 12 and 13. It was coming on for some time. And when you throw an extra monkey wrench in there with the transfers, it kind of skews things, we're thinking everything's okay, and all of a sudden, bam, we're looking at the first version we looked at in January. We were laying down $2.7 million in January this year. I mean, I was horrified. How are we going to get this down to break even? I didn't know how we were going to do it. And so we kept beating around on it, and finally I think we knocked it down to 1.5, and it came back with a list of things, and basically it came down to two things. You know, we can either, and you guys, you know, I'm not criticizing what you've done. I know you've done things. Like last year, you know, you made a big inroad trying to cut our healthcare costs down, and we can see the impact of some of that already, you know, that effort. It's really, you know, this year, it looks like the projections are going to be better, right, Randy, from what I see. So you didn't want to attack it again because you already kind of attacked that last year, so you laid that to the side. And that's when, you know, we decided the only other option is to you know, raise the occupational rate. But, you know, that's where we were. We were too far out to make it come into balance. I didn't want to get to that point, to be honest with you. That's why I kept, well, I didn't want to get to this point, but I'll show you one other thing. And I know you don't control this, but I went through some of this, so I know what happens when the expenses get over top of the revenues. What I was trying to say earlier. This is what happens, and you can't stop it. It's like a roller coaster ride, and you can't get off of it until somebody makes some hardcore decisions to stop the bleeding. We went from 14.7 down to 7.1, and I know you're not involved in that, so I'm not. But I'm just saying that's where we came from. I knew that part of it. I didn't want to get back into that deal. And you're right, it's going up. But what I'm saying is the trends, when you look at those trends on the audit report, you can see what's happening. You're starting to see the expenses get over top of the revenues. The recurring expenses are getting over top of the recurring revenues, and it doesn't happen all in one year. It happens as you layer on wage and benefit costs. When you layer on, you know, whatever we decide to do, that reoccurs. If we do a COLA, it's going to happen again next year. You know, that's where I'm coming from. I'm always looking longer than just taking a snapshot. And I realize, you know, you guys have a term of 2 years. You know, you're trying to get as much stuff done as you can, and I understand that. But as finance director, I've got to look at a bigger picture. And you know, you're doing that for the garbage. You know, the garbage thing. You're saying we got to look bigger than that, and I understand what you're saying. We got to look longer to see, you know, when the payback's coming. But you got to do the same thing when you're looking at trying to budget and trying to control the expenses. Once that expenditure number gets higher than your revenues, you can't get it back without making some tough, hard-burn decisions. That's my point.
Which we made. I think everybody acknowledges that revenues look pretty good for the next few years, at least, in regards to what we did with occupational taxes. But you know, my point, and this point is really for the rest of the commission and for the incoming commissioners. I mean, when the finance director tells candidates for office and the press that we're depleting the reserves, that gives people the impression, fair or unfair, that we are depleting the reserves. We get an audit that proves that wasn't true. When folks talk to our finance director and get the impression that the city just lost $350,000, I mean, we all know that isn't true. And Steve can argue that, well, he didn't mean to give people the wrong impression. And that may be the case.
I'm not arguing that, really.
I guess here's my deeper point. I guess I'll make my one point, because I could pick apart all the different times Steve has convinced us or somebody else of something that isn't true. It happens over and over and over again, and we can debate whether or not Steve is trying to convince people of things that aren't true, or whether or not he's just wrong a lot. I think that's frankly beside the point. What matters the most is that the commission, in order to make the decisions we make, in order to make the decisions that the next commission has to make, and in order to consider the short-term and the long-term consequences of our decisions, we have to base our decisions on good information. Our decisions aren't worth diddly squat if they're not based on good information. And regardless of whether or not Steve is intentionally misleading folks or he's just wrong a whole lot, my point is that in my experience over the last 4 years, the commission cannot trust the information we get from Steve. We just can't. I mean, I learned that the hard way my very first year.
Well, Commissioner, these records have been audited, have they not?
Yes.
Every year.
Oh, I'm not complaining about that. I think the audit's great. The audit's fine.
And you're saying you use the numbers.
And it's all
Same
in.
numbers, yeah.
So
Same
how can you
numbers.
say, if he uses the numbers that come in, how can you say you can't believe it?
I guess I will note, Mayor, that we lowered property taxes this year and that none of us got charged with a criminal offense. None of us did, and I don't expect any of us will, because my understanding is what we did is actually legal, contrary to what
No, you've said.
to what we were convinced of initially.
Let me address that.
I don't want to.
That's a legitimate question. Can I address that?
If I could, I got off course. Let me make my one.
Let's try to drive this up.
I will. I'll wrap this up. Here's the I think the single deepest illustration of what I'm talking about. When I first joined the commission, we were convinced that we needed to cut longevity pay and create a garbage fee in order to break even. We were told about this deficit, the deficit between revenues and expenses, and we, well, I voted against it, but a majority of the commission was convinced that we had to do that just in order to break even, in order to keep from depleting the reserves any further. Now, we ended up posting that year surplus of what, $1.3 million off the top of my head.
1.2. That's what.
Okay, 1.2 million, right. Meaning in hindsight, we could have, if you take out the $600,000 for the garbage fee, if you take out the $100,000, maybe it was 120, it was 90,000. If you take out the money we saved on longevity pay, we still would have pulled in a surplus. So it turned out in hindsight, and I realize that budgeting is an estimate and that nobody can claim to predict the future entirely. But an audit came out that proved that what we based our initial decision on just turned out to not be true. It turned out that we didn't have to do that stuff in order to balance the budget. Which brings me to my deeper point, and this happened with this commission. When the size of that reserve was made known to this commission, and this happened in June of last year, and we were talking about that decision that was made 2 years prior, then Steve told us that his goal at the time was to grow our reserves, that the reserves had gone down and that he felt it was important to grow the reserves, and we had to establish a garbage fee and cut longevity pay, et cetera, in order to grow the reserves. That was his intention. I mean, do I need to spell this out any further? And Steve told the last commission this stuff was essential to break even. That turned out to not be true, and he told this commission that his actual intention at the time was to grow the reserves. So that first time around, Steve, was your goal to break even or to grow the reserves? Because you've given us two different stories, and they can't both be true.
Steve, we've had a long discussion here. You have a chance to.
Yeah, let me
we
say one more thing.
got to move on here, guys.
Yeah, sure.